All right, history buffs, get ready for a wild ride. Today's deep dive, we're tackling Turkish history. But hold on to your hats, because we're not landing in 1071. Forget the Battle of Manzikert, we're going way further back.
You're right, gotta ditch that traditional timeline of Turks arriving in Anatolia. We're talking about a much earlier presence, way before 1071 AD. Think pre-Turks.
Pre-Turks, okay, now you've got my attention. This sounds like we're about to rewrite history. What's the scoop? What have they found?
Picture this. Archaeologists are digging around in Kyrgyzstan's Simalitas Valley, right? And what they're finding is turning heads. We're not talking about your average nomadic tribes just passing through. These folks were innovators, inventing the wheel, domesticating animals, the works. We're talking settling down, cultivating land, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, so not just surviving, thriving. Okay, you've blown my mind. But hold on a sec, we're talking Anatolia here. And that's a trek from Kyrgyzstan. How are researchers making that leap, connecting those dots over such huge distances?
Now, this is where it gets truly fascinating. Deep in Anatolia, researchers have uncovered rock paintings, inscriptions, even symbols that look strikingly similar to those found way over in Central Asia. And get this, these findings date back to 13,000 BC. We're talking millennia before that traditional narrative even starts.
13,000 BC, are you serious? That is mind-boggling. So could we be talking about the people who built Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest monumental sites ever discovered? Could they have had ties to these pre-Turks?
You hit the nail on the head. That's the million-dollar question. It's got everyone talking. Even Klaus Schmidt, the guy who brought Göbekli Tepe to light, he saw it too. The similarities are undeniable. We're talking artistic motifs, architectural styles, even the same animal figures. And these echoes are popping up in Central Asian sites linked to ancient Turkic cultures.
Okay, so we're not talking coincidence here. This is a deep-rooted connection. But if this research is so groundbreaking, why haven't we heard more about it? It seems like this could turn history on its head.
Well, here's the thing about history. It's not set in stone. It's always evolving, right? New evidence pops up, old interpretations get challenged. It's a dynamic process. Think about it challenging long-held beliefs, especially about something as fundamental as cultural identity. It can be tough for some people to wrap their heads around.
It's like those moments in science when a new discovery rocks our understanding of, say, evolution. People don't always embrace change easily.
Exactly. And remember, sometimes those who challenge the status quo, they face more than just academic debate. Take scholars like Eric Fagel and Stanford Shaw. These guys were pioneers in questioning the traditional narrative of Turkish arrival in Anatolia, and they face serious opposition for their views, even personal attacks.
Wow, that really makes you think about the responsibility that comes with uncovering the past and the courage it takes to challenge the accepted narrative.
Absolutely. And it underscores the importance of open minds, We've got to be open to different viewpoints, respectful dialogue. We're all on this journey of discovery together.
I love that perspective. Okay, so we've got these fascinating connections, right? These links between pre-Turkic cultures in Central Asia and what we see in Anatolia, especially at Göbekli Tepe. But if this link is so strong, why hasn't it totally overturned the established narrative? What are some of the counter-arguments?
That's a fantastic question. One of the biggest points of contention is how we interpret these symbols and motifs. Critics argue that, yeah, similarities in art are interesting, but they don't automatically equal direct cultural lineage. They say that these shared elements could be a result of cultural diffusion. Think of it like ideas and practices spreading through trade, migration, just contact between groups over time.
So kind of like how fashion trends or music spreads globally today, it influences different cultures.
Precisely. Just like today, where we see a blend of cultural influences, ancient societies probably did the same thing. They adopted and adapted stuff from their neighbors, creating this complex mix of shared artistic expressions.
It really makes you realize how interconnected the ancient world might have been, even across vast distances.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this area of study so captivating. It's like we're putting together a giant, intricate puzzle, and each new discovery either strengthens existing connections or uncovers new ones. It's thrilling.
Okay, so we've got these intriguing clues pointing to a much earlier, more ancient Turkish presence in Anatolia. But we've also got some valid counter-arguments to consider. So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway for someone who's just starting to explore this?
It's like this. History isn't static. It's dynamic, always being reshaped, reinterpreted as new discoveries emerge and perspectives change. This debate about the pre-Turks, perfect example of that in action.
So instead of searching for one definitive answer, we should embrace the mystery, keep those questions coming.
Exactly. What makes this field so exciting is that there's still so much we don't know. Every new archaeological find, every deciphered inscription, every artifact we analyze at all has the potential to change our understanding of the past.
I love that the past is full of surprises. So if you had to give our listeners one thing to ponder, one key takeaway from all of this, what would it be?
I think the most crucial thing is this. History isn't about memorizing names and dates. It's about understanding the forces that shaped our world. The story of the pre-Turks, even if the theory isn't definitively proven, challenges us to look at what we thought we knew about the past and open ourselves to new possibilities.
I like that. Challenging assumptions, being open to new perspectives. That's what makes exploring history so rewarding. Okay, so we've established that the traditional narrative of Turkish history might be due for a rewrite. But let's get specific. You mentioned earlier that researchers have found some pretty convincing evidence in Anatolia that supports this idea of a pre-Turkic presence. What kind of evidence are we talking about?
Well, one of the most compelling pieces comes from the work of Professor Afif Ersin. He founded the Van Regional History and Archaeology Research Center and dedicated his career to studying the ancient history of Anatolia.
This is the same Professor Urson who wrote Anatolia and the Urartu, right? You mentioned his work earlier.
That's the one. In his book, he meticulously documents these cultural connections between ancient Anatolia and Central Asia, and he goes all the way back to the Neolithic period.
Okay, so this isn't just vague similarities. This is concrete evidence, documented by a respected scholar. What specific findings did Professor Urson uncover?
Ursin's work focuses on a whole range of discoveries: rock paintings, inscriptions, even pottery fragments and tools. He found that tons of symbols and motifs found at these ancient Anatolian sites look incredibly similar to those found in Central Asia. And we're talking about findings that date back thousands of years.
So we're seeing echoes of a shared visual language across vast distances and time periods. It's incredible.
It really is. For example, one symbol that caught Ursin's eye was the running spiral. It's a motif that pops up in both Göbekli Tepe and various Central Asian sites. This spiral, it's everywhere, from monumental architecture to everyday objects, which suggests a deep-rooted cultural significance.
Wait, the running spiral, isn't that the same motif that some scholars think represents the cycle of life or even the cosmos?
Exactly, and that's what makes these discoveries so intriguing. They hint at a shared belief system, a common worldview connecting these cultures over incredible distances.
It's like piecing together a giant puzzle, with each discovery revealing more about this intricate tapestry of human history.
That's a great analogy. And as we dig deeper, we find more puzzle pieces. For instance, recent excavations at a place called Çatalhöyük, another amazing Neolithic settlement in Anatolia, unearthed artifacts and architectural styles that further strengthen the link to Central Asian cultures.
So the evidence keeps piling up, but I imagine not everyone is convinced by these findings. What do critics of this theory have to say about all of this?
You're right, not everyone's on board with this whole pre-Turkic presence in Anatolia, and that's a good thing. Healthy skepticism is crucial in any field, right? It pushes us to constantly reevaluate what we think we know.
So what are some of the criticisms leveled against the pre-Turk theory?
One of the most common is that the evidence is too circumstantial. Critics say that just because two cultures have similar symbols or motifs, it doesn't mean they were directly related. After all, cultural exchange has always been part of human history. It's possible these similarities are simply the result of ancient trade routes or migration patterns.
So it's like saying that just because two people from different parts of the world both love pizza, it doesn't mean they're long-lost relatives.
Exactly. Cultural diffusion, that's what it's called. It can create these fascinating examples of parallel evolution, where similar ideas or practices just pop up independently in different parts of the world.
That's a good point. It reminds us that human history is messy and complex, no easy answers.
Absolutely, and that's what makes studying the past so endlessly fascinating.
Okay, so we have tantalizing clues, but we also need to consider the points raised by those who are skeptical of the pre-Turk theory. Seems like we need more research to really prove or disprove this connection.
You're absolutely right. This is still a relatively new area of research, tons more work to do, but that's the beauty of it. Every new discovery has the potential to rewrite our understanding of the past.
I am hooked on this. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back. Why does all of this matter? We've been talking about pre-Turks and Göbekli Tepe, but what's the significance for the average person? Why should we care about what happened in Anatolia thousands of years ago?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's one that every historian wrestles with. At its core, history is about understanding ourselves, wouldn't you say? Where we come from, how we got here, what it means to be human.
I like that history as a mirror to our own humanity.
Exactly. And this whole story of the pre-Turks, whether or not it's ultimately proven, it forces us to expand our view of human history. It reminds us that the world is a vast, interconnected place, always has been, and cultures have always influenced and borrowed from one another.
It's like that saying, the more we learn about the past, the more we realize how much we don't know.
Precisely. And that's what makes this field so endlessly fascinating.
Okay, so this isn't just about dates and dusty artifacts. It's about challenging our assumptions and embracing the complexity of human history. But let's bring this back to the pre-Turks. You mentioned earlier that this theory, if proven, has the potential to rewrite how we understand Turkish history. Can you elaborate on that? What aspects of Turkish history would be most affected by this discovery?
Well, one immediate impact would be on the timeline of the Turkish presence in Anatolia. The traditional story puts their arrival in the 11th century AD with the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 marking a turning point.
Right, that's the battle that's often credited with paving the way for the Seljuk Turks to conquer Anatolia.
Exactly. But if this pre-Turk theory holds water, that timeline gets pushed back thousands of years. We're not talking about a recent arrival anymore. We're talking about a connection to the region stretching back to the dawn of civilization.
That is a massive shift in perspective.
It is, and it would have huge implications for how we understand Turkish identity and cultural heritage. The traditional story emphasizes the Turks' nomadic background, their arrival in Anatolia as conquerors.
Well, it's the classic image of a warrior people sweeping in from the steppes and establishing a new empire.
Exactly. But the pre-Turk theory challenges that narrative. It suggests that the Turkish connection to Anatolia is far more ancient, far more complex than we thought.
So it's not about changing a few dates in a history book. It's about fundamentally changing how we see an entire culture's origins and identity.
Precisely. And that's why this research is so important. It has the potential to reshape our understanding of not just Turkish history, but human history as a whole.
This is all so fascinating. But before we get too carried away with the implications of the pre-Turk theory, let's take a moment to acknowledge that other interpretations exist. What are some alternative explanations for the similarities between those ancient Anatolian and Central Asian cultures? Explanations that don't rely on a direct genealogical link.
Well, one possibility is that those similarities we see, they aren't necessarily evidence of a direct linear connection between those cultures. Think of it more like cultural exchange, ideas and practices spreading from one group to another over time.
So are we saying that these ancient Anatolians and Central Asians were just swapping ideas and cultural practices like trading cards?
Well, not exactly like trading cards, but you're on the right track. Even in those days, people weren't living in isolation, right? Trade routes, migration patterns, even conflicts, all those things acted as channels for spreading cultural influences.
So you're saying it's possible that the ancestors of the Turks, even if they weren't living in Anatolia way back then, could have interacted with the people who were already there. And through that contact, they picked up some of the same symbols, same practices that we're seeing in the archaeological record.
Precisely. It's like a giant cultural melting pot, with ideas and influences swirling around, blending over millennia. It's entirely possible that those elements we link with the pre-Turks actually came from somewhere else, got adopted and adapted by those who eventually migrated to Anatolia.
Okay, so maybe it's not an either situation, but a both-hand scenario. We could be talking about ancient connections, cultural diffusion, maybe even some direct lineage all mixed together.
Exactly, and that's what makes this such a fascinating puzzle to untangle. It's like detective work. We're gathering clues from the past, trying to piece together the big picture.
And like any good detective story, there are going to be twists and turns along the way. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the pre-Turks and ancient Anatolia, what's the one big takeaway you'd want to leave with our listeners?
I think it's crucial to remember that history isn't some static, dusty old thing. It's a living story, constantly being rewritten as we find new evidence, re-examine what we thought we knew. This whole pre-Turk theory. Whether it's proven right or wrong, it shows us how our understanding of the past is always evolving.
I love that it's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to discover, more to question, and who knows what other secrets are out there, buried beneath the sands of time, just waiting to be found.
That's the beauty of history. It's an endless adventure of exploration.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those mysteries. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the ancient world, and until next time, keep exploring.
Well, one way to think about it is that those shared symbols and practices, they might not be evidence of a direct connection, like a parent culture and a descendant culture, but more like distant relatives who've influenced each other over time.
Distant relatives. So we're not talking about like a family tree, but more of a family reunion. Everyone's connected, but the lines are a bit blurry.
Exactly. It's more like a complex web of interactions, right? We've got trade routes connecting different regions, migration patterns bringing people together, even conflicts, believe it or not, those can lead to cultural exchange, as strange as that sounds.
So it's possible that even if the ancestors of the Turks weren't living in Anatolia themselves way back then, they could have encountered the ideas and practices of those who were already there through trade, through migration, through conflict.
Precisely. Imagine those interactions, those encounters, happening over thousands of years, like a slow but steady process of cultural diffusion where ideas and symbols spread and evolve.
So it's less about tracing a direct lineage and more about recognizing the interconnectedness of these ancient cultures. The ancestors of the Turks might not have built Göbekli Tepe, but they were part of a broader cultural network that shared ideas, symbols, and practices across vast distances.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole area of study so exciting. We're
Right.
not just tracing lines on a map, we're tracing the flow of ideas, beliefs, and artistic expressions across time and space, trying to understand how those interactions shaped the cultures we know today.
It's like those 6 degrees of separation games, except we're talking about connections that span millennia, not just a few handshakes.
Exactly. And who knows what other connections we'll uncover as we continue to explore. That's the beauty of it. Every new discovery has the potential to shed light on those ancient relationships, those cultural exchanges that have shaped our world in ways we're just beginning to understand.
It's incredible to think about those echoes of the past still resonating in the present, isn't it?
Hmm.
It makes you wonder what other secrets are still waiting to be unearthed, what other connections are waiting to be made.
That's the beauty of history. It's an ongoing conversation, a journey of discovery that never really ends.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners to ponder the mysteries of the past. Thank you for joining us for this incredible deep dive into the ancient world. And until next time, keep exploring.